Hello and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Monday, August 29th. It's also a great pleasure to be joined here in our studio by Speaker of the House, Jill Krowinski. She represents a district up in Burlington and has served in the House of Representatives since 2012. She was elected to as the Speaker of the House in 2021. And before that served as the majority leader in the House of Representatives up in Montpelier. Speaker Krowinski, welcome to the News Project.
It's great to be here.
Great to have you with us, and thank you very much for making the time for this conversation on what I know is a very busy day while you're traveling around through Bennington County, and greatly appreciate that. I thought just to kind of get us started here, we could talk a little bit about some of the issues you see sort of playing large roles in the coming fall elections. What do you see as the primary issues in play that voters ought to be thinking about or be aware of or be focused on?
Sure. Well, what I will say that's fascinating about this election cycle is that as I travel the state, I am hearing the same themes, very specific issues that people are concerned about. So there's definitely consistency about what Vermonters want from their elected officials for us to work on in January. That's affordable housing and childcare. People are concerned about workforce and workforce development. We don't have enough workers to meet the needs that we have, and the reason why we don't have them for many reasons is that they can't find affordable housing for those jobs. So I'm hearing a lot about that. I'm also hearing a lot of concern about the Supreme Court case that overturned Roe v. Wade. And we in the legislature have worked hard for the past couple of years to protect abortion rights in our state statutes, and then we pushed and worked together to support a constitutional amendment, the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, and that is on the ballot in November. And so there is a lot of concern about what's happening around the country, and what I tell Vermonters is that we've protected it here, and by passing this constitutional amendment, it will further protect it in our Constitution, so we need to do that. So those are several of the issues that I'm hearing about on the campaign trail, and I'm looking forward to continuing to go around the state and hear what's on people's minds.
So when you all get back to Montpelier next January, what do you think should be the first thing that the legislature should be focusing on in terms of housing? Because let's drill down into that for a second.
Yes.
Around here, and I'm sure throughout the rest of the state, that seems to be issue number one. The lack of housing just seems to have so many ramifications through business and education. Do you think with the investments that the state has made so far through the ARPA funds and other federal money that we've received are going to be enough to kind of begin to nudge that in the right direction, or is there much more that needs to happen?
Well, we've put a good start in with the investments we've made. Over $300 million we've pushed into the system to help build housing in all different ways, from helping low-income to middle-income housing, to looking at how we can help our homelessness population. And I'll say that right now, as we're looking at the investments we've made, we're seeing themes of challenges around supply chain issues and having the people to do the work, to do the construction, which has been a challenge. We don't have enough plumbers. We don't have enough electricians or carpenters. We invested money in workforce development in those careers, but it will take time for those people to go through the program and to get them into the workforce. So those are issues that we need to look at, and I'm worried about our housing insecurity issues, and we did a lot of investing for the short term on how to keep people safe and housed during the pandemic, and now we need a plan on how we do that in the long term. I think we've learned some lessons about what has worked and what doesn't work. People need to have support systems around them to be successful, so that will be a big part of the conversation that we're having when we get back into the building.
And you mentioned the fact that we need a lot of workers in a lot of these areas, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, et cetera, as well as I suppose across the board. I mean, the whole demographic challenge the state has faced for several years now still seems to be a problem. Mm-hmm. What do you think the state can do to kind of attract more folks to either move here or to retain younger Vermonters who in years past would go off to New York or Boston or some other urban area where the job opportunities are more available and salaries are better or whatever. I mean, is there a pathway forward you see where we can offset that?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to a lot of the same themes that we've been working on. So our workforce development bill put so much resources into our state college system, which was great, into these critical careers to help get more people into nursing, to help get more people into construction. And it's going to take time to get those people through the system out and working. But in that, we've created opportunities for people that never had a chance to go to become a plumber or electrician or a nurse. And so by creating easy ways to get that education through grants or forgivable loans, people are choosing to stay and to take that education and to find work through these new careers. Second, I think our work on childcare is really critical. I think finding access to high quality, affordable childcare in this country is a problem for everyone. And I think that if we can continue to build upon the work that we have to say that you should not be spending over 10% of your income on childcare, that's the threshold, and that we make sure that we're doing everything we can to really improve access to childcare. That's what I'm hearing about from families. Working on policies like paid family leave. These are policies that attract people to want to live in a place where they can have great, safe, affordable housing and childcare. So I think if we continue to build on the work that we've done in those investments, we can retain and attract people to move to Vermont.
And what about climate changes? That was a piece of legislation you almost got through last year. The governor vetoed it, and his veto was sustained, I think, by one vote. The clean heat standard measure there. Is that going to be an area you're going to be prioritizing next January to see if you can come up with some kind of plan to work on that?
So climate change is obviously a huge issue for us and something that I care deeply about and want to continue to work on. I think we did have that one policy bill that did not make it across the finish line, but we were successful in other ways around electric vehicles and weatherization and other ways to help support our environment and clean water. I think moving forward, what will be important for us is to hear from constituents on the campaign trail, to hear about how climate is impacting them and what would be the most meaningful way to help support people and to protect our state moving forward. So we'll be looking at a host of different policies around the table to see what makes sense to work on together with our colleagues in the Senate and to get it to the governor. So again, we're talking to voters and we're doing our research, and then when we come back in January, we'll have some concrete plans to put out for vetting.
Will it be, do you think the clean heat standard measure is something that's worth trying again, more or less as it was shaped last year or this past year, or does it need to be tweaked in some way to kind of make people a little more comfortable with it?
Right. We took a lot of lessons away from working on that policy, and what I think we need to do is kind of wipe the slate clean and start over with all these ideas, because there were parts of that I think we can absolutely make progress on, but there are some other ideas that people are working on that I think would be good to put together. So I think we need to take a minute to really just assess where we are and what are some policies that can help us meet our climate goals in the future. So we're working on that.
Another issue I find myself thinking about a lot is gun safety. Obviously, earlier this summer, we had a couple of really tragic events happening elsewhere in the country. And while I suppose some people have thought, well, that sort of thing doesn't happen here, there's no reason why it couldn't. 4 years ago, I believe it was, the governor signed some legislation that sort of moved that forward a little bit, but I guess it's been kind of stuck since there. Do you feel like where we're at right now in terms of gun safety legislation is a good place to be, or at least as good enough as we can get? Or is there something more we could do in terms of like red flag laws or age restrictions that would be a good idea to have?
Well, those things that you mentioned are policies that we've passed over the several years, starting with the extreme risk protection orders, also known as red flag, as part of that package that the governor signed, and we increased the age as well. Over the past session, we did pass a bill that addressed some new concerns around gun safety, gun violence prevention. So we ban guns from hospitals. We expanded extreme risk protection orders. We closed the Charleston loophole, which was really, really important to do. And there were some measures around domestic violence prevention also in there. So I think those were really important steps to take. What I'm really concerned about, and what we will look at next year in January, is where are we seeing gun violence in Vermont? And right now I'm hearing it a lot from the domestic violence community, who are doing great work to prevent it and have major concerns, and through mental health and suicide prevention. And so I think it's important for us to come together and to have a conversation about, are there policies that we can enact that could make it safer for people? And I think there are opportunities there. So we will continue to be reviewing our gun policy laws in this state and ensuring we're doing everything we can to keep people safe.
Turning to the education side of things, one thing I keep hearing about is that there's a teacher shortage, or a shortage of teachers in various parts of the state. I'm not sure if it's more prevalent in more rural areas than in some of our urban areas, but nationwide that seems to be a problem. I guess I just wondered, do you think there's anything that the legislature can do to either help school districts, recruit more teachers, or find more teachers, or encourage more teachers or more people to go into teaching? Or is it just a case of, that's related to a lot of the other problems, like around housing and cost of living in Vermont or whatever, and it's just, we're going to have to sort it out that way?
Yeah, so my office has started conversations, continuing conversations with the NEA about possible ideas and strategies that we can work on in January. I do think that we have amazing teachers across the state, and some of them are my friends, and it's been very hard. It's been very hard, and they are burnt out, and I am so grateful for their incredible work to stick with it during the pandemic, because that was no easy task, and they're tired. So first of all, I'm just thankful and grateful for them. Secondly, we did look at some ideas last session around ways to bring retired teachers back if they wanted to, ways that we could help support higher education opportunities if they wanted to get a different level of education to advance their teaching career. But again, we hear about affordable housing, like you said, and childcare, and people looking to switch professions. So I think this is something that we're hearing that is all over the country, and something that we definitely have an eye on, and we'll continue to work on for sure.
I suppose that's tied in some ways to kind of coming to I don't want to say coming to an end of the pandemic, because we're clearly not at the end of it. Mm-hmm. But 2.5 years on, it seems like things are, I'm trying to struggle finding the right words here, coming to a sort of a return to normalcy, kind of, sort of. Yeah. How well do you think the state has coped with the COVID pandemic? I mean, in terms of numbers of vaccine rates and stuff, we seem to have done fairly well relative to other parts of the country, but do you think there was, or is, more that we should be doing to ensure that, should the pandemic turn out not to be completely over, we're in as good a shape as we can be?
That is a great question. I think there are things that we have excelled in, like vaccination rates in our state. I had concerns along the way about our mask policy at times. Being from Burlington, every church on every store on Church Street had a different policy at one time, and people would express frustration about that. But looking forward as to where we're going, things change so quickly with new variants, and so what's working today might not work a month from now, and having to be flexible and responsive is difficult. And so I think what's really, really important is for us to be keeping our eye on the big picture of, are we doing everything right now to prevent outbreaks or spreads? Making sure that those that are in assisted living facilities, that they do have what they need to protect their patients from outbreaks. We've seen a lot of those, which is concerning. And I also just think that our healthcare workforce is exhausted, just like so many other people. And so it's really important, we made huge investments, again, in the workforce development bill to support nursing staff, but we're just hearing that they're exhausted and they're leaving nursing as well, or other healthcare careers. So just like teachers, that's a group that we need to keep an eye on and pay attention to and support as we work through this crisis. And to those who are working in public health, thank you. I can't imagine how exhausted they are, especially now with monkeypox and these other diseases, public health crises that are coming up. And it seems like it's just been one thing after another. So kudos and big thanks to those working in the public health field right now, because it's been a long haul.
Yeah, it sure has. I find myself wondering, do you think people have sort of tuned out to this whole thing, and that ongoing booster shots to continue protection against, another variant or just lingering cases of COVID are still around? Do you think there's enough emphasis being placed on making boosters available? I read occasionally where some of the federal dollars that financed some of those booster clinics are not being replenished. Are we going to have a problem with that?
It's mixed. I think that there are some communities that are absolutely taking advantage of it, and others that we need to do more outreach to and public education about. I still have parents in my community, in my circle, that are waiting to get the second booster for their kids. So there are different communities that have different goals and making sure that the second shot. So making sure that they're getting them when they need to, especially if they're in school or working, at a hospital.
Well, I know psychologically we're all kind of burned out on the whole thing, and hopefully no more Delta or Omicrons lying in wait.
I know.
I wanted to turn to sort of more political questions here. Last session, Governor Scott vetoed several bills that were important to your caucus, and I think all told, over the past 6 years of his governorship, he's vetoed about 30 bills, which I think is a record for any governor.
Yep.
Assuming that the party lineups remain roughly the same as they are, and let's assume for our discussion here, Governor Scott is reelected. What do you think the legislature can or should do to kind of, I don't know if it's so, is there a way to work more closely with the governor on some of these pieces so that by the time the bills arrive at his desk, everyone is kind of on the same page? Because another thing I keep hearing about is that the governor kind of waits till the 11th hour before weighing in and saying, I really don't like this little paragraph here. That's not good. We're going to need to revisit it. Is that the case? Does he sort of tend to wait until things are just about done, and then, because I'm thinking of the pension bill with the state workers in particular. How does one work around that, or come up with an arrangement where, when by the time the bills hit his desk, it's like, okay, we're good?
Well, I meet with the governor on a regular basis during the session to talk about what we're working on, to talk about what concerns I might have with where we are in the process, or to hear his concerns. I've been very open and upfront with him about the path that we're taking on bills and wanting his feedback. I think it is very frustrating oftentimes that we ask for feedback, and it's not until the 11th hour that we hear that he has, the administration has changed their position or they want something else. We saw that with pensions. We saw that with our opioid misuse prevention bill, which was really frustrating to have him veto that. Looking into next session, I can only, be clear about where we are and transparent with this process, and to be asking the administration to be transparent and clear about where they are as well. I think what you saw with the pension override is that we were so committed to transparency, into process, and to getting everyone around the table, that at the end of the day, it was a unanimous vote. There was no party line vote on it because we worked so hard to find compromise, and members saw that and voted to show their respect and support for that. That was historic. That has never happened in our state's history. So I hope that after this election, the governor will join us at the table and show up, not waiting until the last moment, and work with us from the very beginning so that we're not governing over veto override, because that's just not healthy, right? One person making a decision ending up for the entire state on how a policy that has had broad support through the process now fails by one. That's just not healthy. And so I hope that in January, we can start a new chapter and come to the table earlier rather than later.
Another bill I was thinking about as you were mentioning there is the Act 250 bill. There was an attempt to update Act 250,
Yes.
50, which is like what now, 52 years old? I was in college when it was first passed, so I should remember
I was going to say, that's
this.
very impressive.
That was a
you
long
knew.
time ago. But I guess I just wondered, do you think Act 250, the bill, the revision of that bill, is going to be brought back more or less as you presented it this past summer, or is there an opportunity for more aspects of that to be rethought?
We're definitely going to be taking that back up when we come back in January. I think we have a lot more work to do to improve that bill. I think it's a great starting place. I think we should start there, and then based on how the elections go and how people are showing up and what their priorities are, if we are able to take that back up and advance it, I think that is really important. We worked really hard on that, and I think, and I hope that we can find a path forward to make that into law.
Because one of his objections was, if I recall correctly, that it might undermine housing possibilities. I guess I'm not sure. Was that? Am I conflating two things here?
You're going to have to ask him about that.
Because I remember.
I'm not going to speak for him.
Okay. I guess just to kind of wrap things up a little bit here.
Sure.
You're looking forward to 2023 in the state's economy. Are there any concerns that you have? We've been hearing a lot about inflation, possible recession, energy costs. How well positioned is the state, in your opinion, to withstand that should
Yes.
worse come to worse and inflation stays at 8 to 10% or whatever, and energy costs remain high? Is there enough of a kind of a rainy day fund in hand to make sure that programs can be fully funded and we're not going to take a massive, great leap backward?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think last year when we started the session with so much ARPA funding, thanks to our amazing federal delegation, I talked to my chair of appropriations to say, what would the Jill and Mary 10 years from now say to us? Because it's going to be critical, because this massive investment will make a difference for generations to come, and we want to make sure that we're making smart strategic investments for the long run. And so I think that we did a great job funding all of our reserves, our rainy day fund, our reserve fund. There are several funds that we are either at or above the recommended rate. I think next year's budget, we should be in a good place, but it's the years after that concern me, that I have question marks about, just because the economy in this environment has just been so different. You really can't compare it to other things. It's been very unique in its own way, and how we've gone through this pandemic and these policy shifts from Washington. So I think next year we'll have to make some tough decisions and be smart and strategic. But it's the years after that I think we need to be making sure we're doing everything to make sure that we're protected.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for right now. But again, Speaker Jill Krowinski, thank you very much for making the time for this conversation today. And we'll We'll be looking forward to seeing how things go in Montpelier come next January.
Thanks so much. It was great to be here.
And thank you all for being with us as well. I hope you've enjoyed our program and found it interesting and informative. And well, we'll see you again the next time. And Speaker Krowinski, you're welcome to come back anytime.
All right, I'll take you up on that.
All right. Thanks again, everyone.